I got fired by a boss so incompetent he didn't even realize I held the patent to the entire system. Honestly, I couldn't wait for Monday. It was going to be satisfying. I still remember the first time I saw him. Samuel Beltran. He walked into the main lobby of Vista Core Technologies like he just inherited the planet. Tailored black suit. Flashy Rolex. That kind of swagger that drips off a guy who's 6 feet tall and thinks that's all it takes. But let's be honest, he had no clue what we actually did there. "Call me Sam," he said, with a smile that never reached his eyes. "I like things fast, efficient, and to the point. We're going to achieve great things." The room fell into one of those stiff silences, broken only by the kind of forced clapping you hear in boardrooms or awkward school recitals. I crossed my arms and stayed silent. I'd been at VistaCore for nearly a decade. I'd seen 3 CEOs come and go, 5 major restructures, and 2 mergers. I knew how the game was played. But Sam? He was about to learn the hard way. That first week? A complete disaster. He canceled our regular project review meetings and replaced them with something called Vision and Strategy Alignment Sessions. By Thursday, he'd already fired 4 mid-level managers, 3 of them by email. Ice cold. And then he started tinkering with our flagship product. Didn't know the first thing about it. That software? I built it. 7 years ago, right after a failed acquisition nearly took the company down. I designed the entire back-end architecture, secure, scalable, bulletproof. And yes, I patented it. In my name. That wasn't just foresight, it was strategy. Actually, it was a direct recommendation from the previous CEO. He told me, "Claire, if you ever leave, they'll beg you to come back." The protection was airtight. Written right into my contract, buried in a clause no one ever reads. Especially not executives like Sam. By week 2, he started calling me technical lead instead of my actual title. Director of Systems Architecture. A small thing, but telling. He stopped making eye contact during meetings. Cut me off mid-sentence. Started congratulating junior staff for ideas I presented weeks earlier. Classic playbook. Minimize, discredit, erase. I stayed professional. But I started documenting everything. Then came that Friday morning. Sam appeared at my office door, leaning against the frame like a second-rate actor in a corporate soap opera. "Claire, can we talk?" he asked. I motioned to the chair across from me. He didn't sit. "I'll be direct," he said, using that tone some men think sounds noble but just reeks of condescension. "You've been here a long time, maybe too long." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for the punchline. "We're letting you go," he said. "Effective immediately. Your position is redundant. HR has everything ready. Naturally, there's severance." He'd clearly rehearsed the line, so smug, so certain, it almost made me laugh. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and watched him. Poor guy. He had no idea. He didn't even suspect what that little overlooked clause in my contract meant. Without me, and without my signature, they legally couldn't continue using the system that powered 78% of VistaCore Technologies' operations. I didn't explain. I just smiled. Calm. Polite. Controlled. "I understand," I said, standing and extending my hand. He didn't take it. Just nodded and walked out like he'd checked off a box. And just before leaving, he tossed one final line over his shoulder. "I'm not wasting another dollar on an employee who peaked 5 years ago." My smile didn't even twitch. "Good luck, Sam," I told him, watching him pause at the door for a split second, maybe confused by how completely calm I was. And then he was gone. I packed my things slowly, methodically. Just a few personal items. The little plant that had somehow survived 5 years with me. A USB drive with nothing but photos from our last team retreat. As I walked through the open office floor, a few heads turned. Some looked down, embarrassed. Others gave me faint, awkward smiles. No one said a word. That's how fear spreads in places like this, quietly. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking not from sadness, but from adrenaline. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was curiosity. How long would it take for them to realize the colossal mistake they had just made? I already knew the answer. Monday. The weekend passed like a storm, heavy with static, charged, waiting to break. I didn't tell anyone I'd been fired. Not my sister, who always said I worked too much. Not my best friend, who would have shown up with a bottle of wine and a 5-step revenge plan. And definitely not my ex-husband, the one who once told me I was more married to my work than to him. What I needed was silence. Room to breathe. Time to think. Friday night, I wandered aimlessly through the city, past shuttered cafes and dark bookstores, letting the cold air dull the sting of betrayal. I wasn't grieving the job. I was grieving the disrespect, the ignorance, the pain of knowing that someone who'd never written a single line of code could walk in and, within seconds, dismiss years of work and sacrifice as redundant. By Saturday morning, I was ready. I went straight to my files and pulled out the contract. Everything was there, black and white. The patent was registered in my name. The clause had been reviewed, notarized, and written with surgical precision. I held full rights over the system I'd created. VistaCore Technologies had a license to use it, yes. But that license required my active participation for any renewal, update, or expansion. And guess what? That license expired on Monday. I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because the timing was too perfect. At exactly 4 p.m., I sent an email to VistaCore's legal department. Not from my deactivated company account. From my personal one. Subject: Notice of expiration, intellectual property usage. Immediate attention required. The message was cold, clear, and to the point. A formal reminder that, under the terms of our licensing agreement, VistaCore Technologies would lose legal access to the system at midnight Sunday, unless they renegotiated with me directly as the sole patent holder. Failure to comply would constitute a violation of intellectual property law, with all associated consequences. I signed the email, clean and professional. Claire Mendoza, inventor of the back-end architecture of VistaCore Engine 2.3. Patent No. R120211003C. I CC'd everyone who needed to know, legal, the former CTO. And yes, I made sure to include Sam. Then I closed the laptop with a satisfying click and went for a run. 8 kilometers through fog-draped streets, dodging tourists in food carts, feeling the tension melt away with every stride. By Sunday afternoon, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 2 missed calls from an unknown number. A voicemail from HR. Claire, we'd like to clarify a few points regarding your exit agreement. An email from the legal team. Please contact us urgently to review the terms of your previous agreement. And then, late that night, the message I'd been waiting for. An email from Sam. Subject: Urgent misunderstanding about the contract. The message read like a desperate whisper. Claire, I think there's been a mistake. I'd like to speak with you directly before Monday begins. Please call me as soon as possible. Sam. There it was. Panic finally showing its face. I didn't respond. Let them twist in their own uncertainty. Let Monday come. Let them crash headfirst into the truth. The entire infrastructure of the company, the software, the CRM, the API integrations, the automated reports, the client portals. All of it depended on a license they no longer held. This wasn't about revenge. What I wanted was something simpler, respect. And if respect had to arrive wrapped in frantic emails, desperate phone calls, and an oncoming legal storm, so be it. Monday came, and I was already up. Coffee steaming in my mug. Phone fully charged. Laptop open. I sat on my couch in leggings and an oversized hoodie, watching the clock tick toward 9 a.m., the official start of business at VistaCore Technologies. At 9:08, my inbox exploded. Critical system errors. Backend authentication failures. Urgent. Clients unable to access their dashboards. An email from Sam. Claire, please call me. Urgent. A text from Lucy Torres, an old friend on the product team. Was it you? Please tell me it was you. Sam is losing his mind. Everything was collapsing. Meetings canceled. Clients furious. Phones ringing nonstop. The board of directors had already been notified. And I smiled. Not out of malice, but because finally everything was clear. This wasn't sabotage. This was exactly what happens when people who don't understand the value of something make decisions without knowledge or respect for the work behind it. At 9:36, my phone rang. This time I answered. Claire. Sam's voice trembled. The panic was unmistakable. I didn't know about the patent. We need to talk. We want you to come back, he added quickly. I interrupted him gently. Sam, I'm open to a conversation. But this isn't about a job anymore. I paused. We're talking about licensing. As an external partner. Silence. Claire, he whispered, almost pleading. Let's not make this personal. I smiled to myself before replying. Oh, Sam. This isn't personal. It's contractual. And I hung up. That's when the real negotiation began. At 10:15 a.m., I walked through the front entrance of Vista Core Technologies headquarters. Not the employee side door, no. Straight through the main lobby, letting my heels echo sharply on the marble floor. This wasn't a return. It was a reappearance. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. "Ms. Mendoza," she murmured. I gave her a calm smile. "I have an appointment with legal." She nodded quickly, visibly flustered, and picked up the phone. Her hand trembled slightly as she dialed. Around me, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations dimmed. Glances flicked in my direction. "You can take the elevator to the 7th floor," she said. "They're expecting you." As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored steel. I looked composed, confident. But underneath, my heart was racing. Not from fear, but from razor-sharp focus. I'd spent the entire weekend preparing for this moment. This wasn't just about protecting what I had built. It was about reclaiming my worth. When I stepped into the legal conference room, the air was thick with caution. The head of legal stood to greet me, flanked by 2 in-house attorneys and a senior advisor I vaguely remembered from one of our past corporate mergers. Sam, of course, was nowhere to be seen. I took a seat at the far end of the table. If they wanted anything from me, they could come to me. "Claire," the advisor began, voice smooth but measured, "thank you for coming. We'd like to resolve this amicably." "Of course," I said with a polite smile. "I prefer to keep things clean and clear. I assume you've reviewed the license agreement." They nodded. "Yes. We've reviewed it, and we can confirm your claims are entirely valid. The system's patent was in my name. And as I pointed out, continuing to use it without my consent was a violation. The license had officially expired at midnight on Sunday." There was a pause before the advisor leaned forward. "We'd like to offer you a retroactive license extension. 1 year. Same terms. Full access to the system." I smiled, calm and steady. "I'm not interested." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. One of the attorneys started scribbling notes at lightning speed. "I didn't come here to repeat past mistakes," I said, keeping my tone even. "Let me ask, are you currently experiencing a major system outage?" "Yes," they admitted after a beat. "And it's affecting both client-facing platforms and internal systems, including development access?" The head of legal nodded, resigned. "Perfect," I said, shifting comfortably in my chair. "Then let's talk numbers. I want $1.5 million for a non-exclusive license valid for the next 12 months. Renewable quarterly. Technical support provided by me or by consultants I personally approve. And full public attribution of my patent in all official Vista Core Technologies documentation." This wasn't improvisation. I knew my worth, and that figure was well within market standards given the system's scale and impact. The silence that followed was heavy, exactly what I expected. They hadn't anticipated I'd come this prepared. Or this firm. Finally, one of the attorneys cleared her throat. "That's a substantial increase from the previous terms." "What it represents," I replied without blinking, "is the real value you've been ignoring." The head of legal leaned back in his chair. "We'll need to present this to the board." "Of course," I said evenly. "But let's be clear. Every hour you delay, your reputation erodes, your clients lose confidence, and your stock takes the hit. It's in your best interest to move fast." No one disagreed. At 11:05 a.m., I stepped out of the conference room and waited quietly outside. No theatrics, no need to make an entrance. Just stillness, calm, and focus. That's when I saw him. Sam, pacing behind the glass, unaware I was watching. When his eyes finally met mine, he froze. Then his expression shifted. First, confusion. Then something deeper, recognition. He walked over, slower than usual, measuring each step. "Claire," he said, forcing a smile far too tight to be genuine. "I didn't expect to see you here in person." "Of course not, Sam," I replied softly. "You didn't expect a lot of things." He gave a half shrug, hands shoved in his pockets like that might make him seem composed. "I think this whole situation's gotten out of hand," he said. "You mean we should have talked before you fired me?" I raised an eyebrow. He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance. "This isn't personal, Sam. It's strictly contractual." And without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away. I didn't go far. I was exactly where I needed to be, on the 7th floor of Vista Core Technologies. Not as an employee, but as someone they now needed. No badge. No detours. I took the direct route. The atmosphere had shifted. Focused. Like a building bracing for aftershocks. When I re-entered the legal conference room, they were already there waiting. By 10:15 a.m., I was on the 7th floor of VistaCore Technologies. Not through the employee entrance. I arrived exactly as I intended, visible, composed, and unmistakably in control. This wasn't a return. This was a statement. I stepped into the legal conference room. They were there waiting. The atmosphere was tight. The head of legal stood to greet me, flanked by 2 in-house attorneys and a senior advisor I vaguely remembered from past mergers. As expected, Sam was not in the room. I took the farthest seat at the table. Let them come to me. Claire, the advisor began carefully. Thank you for coming. Our goal is to resolve this amicably. I'm glad to hear that, I replied calmly. I assume you've reviewed the license agreement? He nodded. Yes. And we can confirm you're absolutely right. The patent is registered in your name. Using it without authorization is a breach. The license expired, just as you stated. He paused, then added. We'd like to offer a retroactive extension. 1 full year. Same terms. I smiled, composed. That won't be enough. A ripple moved through the room. One attorney scrambled to take notes. I'm not here to accept the deal you took for granted, I said evenly. Do you understand you're experiencing a major system disruption right now? They exchanged glances, then nodded. It's affecting client platforms, internal systems, developer access, everything, the advisor admitted. I leaned in slightly. Then let's talk real terms. I'm requesting $1.5 million for a non-exclusive license, valid for 12 months. Renewable quarterly. Technical support provided by me or a team I personally approve. And clear public acknowledgement in all documentation. Designed and patented by Claire Mendoza. They hadn't seen it coming. They'd expected panic. Concession. Maybe silence. But not this. One of the lawyers cleared their throat lightly. That's quite a shift from the original agreement. No, I replied, calm and direct. That reflects the real value you've chosen to ignore. The head of legal leaned back, visibly uneasy. We'll need to escalate this to the board. Of course, I said. But every minute you delay further erodes your reputation, your client trust, and your investor confidence. You'd be wise to move fast. No one argued. They just nodded. At 11:05 a.m., I waited quietly in the hallway, a bottle of water in hand, calm as ever. That's when I saw him. Sam. Pacing behind the glass doors, clearly agitated, clearly unaware I was watching. Then his eyes found mine. And he froze. A flicker of confusion. Then recognition. He walked toward me, slower than usual, measuring each step. Claire, he said, trying to sound casual. Didn't expect to see you here in person. Of course not, Sam, I replied evenly. You didn't expect a lot of things. He forced a smile and shoved his hands into his pockets, like posture could substitute composure. I think this might be getting out of hand, he offered. Before or after you fired me without understanding the consequences? I arched an eyebrow. He opened his mouth to speak. But I didn't give him the chance. This isn't anger, Sam. It's exhaustion. From being underestimated again and again. I pulled out my folder, steady as ever. I have everything documented. The patent. The license terms. Your termination email issued without cause. I didn't come here to fight. I came here to negotiate. His jaw tightened. Still no words. If you want to salvage what's left of this deal, I said, walking past him. Let your legal team do their job. And just before I stepped through the door, I looked over my shoulder. Oh, and good luck, Sam. That word again, luck. Something I never needed. By midday, the conference room had filled again. But the air was heavier now, tight with tension you could almost hear. The board of directors wasn't physically present. But their presence hovered like a shadow over every word spoken. What began as a misunderstanding was now a high-stakes legal issue, with shareholder exposure on the line. I didn't blink. The general counsel sat across from me, tie loosened, voice clipped, expression hardened. We've reviewed your proposal, he said. And while we find it aggressive. Accurate, I corrected. He paused. Then nodded. Fair. We're prepared to meet your requested amount. But with one condition. A 6-month contract, renewable quarterly as you suggested. Perfect, I replied. Though we both knew the most important part hadn't been addressed. And about the public acknowledgement, he continued. We prefer to frame it as a technical collaboration, rather than direct credit. I leaned forward. No. He blinked. Excuse me. I want it stated clearly and directly. System designed and patented by Claire Mendoza. No spin. No soft language. Silence followed, heavy and unmoving. The attorney to my left dropped her gaze to her notes. The general counsel removed his glasses, thinking. "We'll need to bring that back to the board," he said at last. "Do that," I said, collecting my folder. "And make this clear to them, very clear. The SEC doesn't take kindly to undisclosed licensing disputes that threaten operational continuity." The message hit its mark, clean, deliberate. And they knew exactly what it meant. Audits. Investor panic. Potential delisting. I knew their game better than they did. Now I was playing by my rules. As I stepped into the hallway, I ran into Lucy Torres, waiting discreetly by the elevator. "They're calling you the firewall upstairs," she said, smirking. I gave her a half-smile. "Better that," I said, than being called redundant. Lucy let out a quiet laugh and leaned in, lowering her voice. "People are talking, Claire." Sam's in full panic mode, trying to convince the board it was just a communication error. "He's claiming you never warned him about the license expiration." "That's a lie," I said calmly. "But let him talk. The truth doesn't need to shout." Lucy stepped a little closer. "Everyone saw the memo. You CC'd legal before the expiration. There's paper everywhere. Interns are whispering about it like it's the new Watergate." I didn't say anything. My mind was already on the next move. I didn't just want control back. I wanted consequences. At dawn the next day, I sent an email. Not to legal. Not to Sam. Directly to the chairman of the board. Using a contact address I'd quietly saved from a previous project. Subject: System license, public disclosure, and leadership conduct. I was respectful but direct. I outlined how Sam had fired me without reviewing critical IP obligations. How he was now attempting to spin the narrative in his favor. And I ended the message with one question. If this is how he handles internal resources, how can you trust him with external partners, vendors, or regulators? The reply came quickly. Not from the chairman himself, but from a senior liaison on the board. "Claire, thank you for your clarity and professionalism. Please know we are taking this matter seriously. We'll conduct a full internal review using the documentation you've provided. In the meantime, we support the proposed license agreement and expect to finalize it within 48 hours under your terms." I stared at the message for a few moments, then leaned back in my chair and let the air leave my lungs slowly. It wasn't a public apology, but it was a shift. Not just in tone. In power. That night, another message from Lucy came in. "Sam is losing it. Board meeting early tomorrow. His assistant says he's calling in favors left and right, trying to contain the damage." I replied without hurry. "Let him try. I've got the truth, and a paper trail longer than his entire resume." I knew the next day wouldn't just be about signing a license agreement. It would be a reckoning. The board convened their meeting at 9 a.m. on Wednesday. At 9:23, I received a direct invitation. Not from Sam. Not from legal. From the chairman himself, James Ortega. The email was short, direct, but the tone was unmistakable. "Please join us for a private session at 11 o'clock. We deeply value your perspective for this discussion." That word again, valuable. 2 weeks ago, I'd been labeled redundant. Now suddenly, I was indispensable. The irony might have made me laugh. If it weren't so revealing. At exactly 10:55 a.m., I walked into the boardroom on the executive floor of VistaCore Technologies. I'd only been in that room once before years ago when I presented a system roadmap. That day I stood in the corner. Invisible? Not today. Today, I walked straight to the chair with my name on it, without hesitation. Sam was already there across the table. Arms crossed. Phone face down like some forbidden ornament. His tie was perfect. His smile rehearsed. But his eyes? The worry was real. And impossible to hide. James Ortega opened the meeting with a few formalities. Then turned to me. "Claire, thank you for being here. We've reviewed your documentation and the terms of the license. We'd like to hear your perspective before we deliberate." I nodded, calm and ready. "Of course," I said, rising to my feet. I spread my notes across the table. But I didn't need to read them. I looked at each board member, one by one, and spoke with steady conviction. Leadership isn't about exerting control. It's about clarity. It's about understanding the systems that hold your company together, technical and human. When a new executive steps into a system they don't understand, they have two choices. Listen. Or bulldoze. Sam chose to bulldoze. I saw him shift in his seat, uncomfortable but silent. I continued. He called me incompetent. Fired me without reviewing the infrastructure that kept this company running. Worse, he only reacted when the system crashed. And your client started sounding the alarms. I let the silence settle. Every line of code I wrote, every system I built was designed to protect VistaCore Technologies. But even the best software can't protect you from arrogance. If your CEO doesn't understand the operational architecture or the value of the people behind it, you don't just have a legal issue. You have a structural one. Another pause. Then one of the board members leaned forward. What would you do if you were in his position? I allowed myself a faint smile. I wouldn't be in his position, I said. I'd be standing beside leaders who understand product, culture, and governance. I'd build a model that values collaboration over control. And I would never wait for a lawsuit. To respect the people who keep this company alive. James Ortega nodded slowly. Thank you, Claire. Please wait outside while we deliberate. I stood, offered a respectful nod to each of them, and stepped out. I waited in the hallway, seated in a leather chair, while behind the door pressure mounted. Not long after, I heard raised voices. They weren't mine. They were Sam's, cracking, desperate, trying to blame legal, the CTO, HR, anyone. The old tactic: spread the blame until it disappears. Not this time. At 11:47 a.m., the door opened. James Ortega stepped out himself. Claire, we've reached a decision. Would you come in? I followed him back into the room. Sam was no longer there. James sat across from me, folded his hands, and spoke clearly. Effective immediately, he said. Samuel Beltran has been placed on administrative leave pending a formal review. We will issue an official statement clarifying the situation and publicly recognizing your contribution to VistaCore Technologies. He handed me a printed page, a draft of the public release. I read the first line aloud. We recognize the leadership, innovation, and intellectual property of Claire Mendoza as foundational pillars in the success of VistaCore Technologies. I felt something unexpected in my chest. Not because I needed recognition, but because I knew how many women in tech work their entire careers without ever hearing words like these. James looked at me steady. How would you like to move forward? I had already accepted the new license agreement. But I wasn't done. I'd also like to offer my consulting services, I said. Short term, of course. I have no intention of returning to full-time work. What I want is autonomy and the chance to help you build systems that ensure this never happens again. James nodded, offering a measured smile. Consider it done. I stood up slowly. Just as I was about to leave, I heard him call out. Claire. I turned. You didn't just protect the system, he said. You saved the company. I nodded, slightly calm. I know. As I walked down the hallway, I felt the weight I'd been carrying begin to fall away, not all at once, but like pieces of old armor dropping off, one by one. Lucy Torres was waiting near the elevators. He's gone, she whispered. I gave her a quiet smile, then glanced toward the floor where I'd spent so many years working. This is just the beginning, I said. The internal announcement went out at 2:10 p.m. that Friday. Effective immediately, Samuel Beltran was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into his recent leadership decisions, including terminations and failure to fulfill contractual obligations. VistaCore Technologies also formally recognized me, Claire Mendoza, as the lead architect of its critical infrastructure. My patent and the new license agreement were now part of the company's official operational documentation. The statement was short, but inside the company it hit like a lightning strike. That afternoon, as I walked through the halls, the silence that had ruled for weeks had shifted. It became something warmer. Shy smiles, nods of respect, soft murmurs of congratulations from people who, not long ago, wouldn't even meet my eyes. I wasn't after revenge. I wanted recognition. And more than that, I wanted change. The following Monday, I sat down with the legal department again. But this time, not to put out fires. To build. I proposed a new framework. A system designed not only to protect internal innovation, but also to shield employees from leadership failure. It included things that should have existed long ago. Automatic IP contract audits triggered by executive transitions. A direct, anonymous whistleblower channel connected to the board. And a mentorship program for junior engineers, focused on IP rights, visibility, and boundary setting. I didn't just want to win. I wanted to leave something solid behind. Within a week, we signed the consulting agreement. I would stay for 120 days, help stabilize the system, repair the damage caused by the chaos, and train a new architect to take the reins. On my terms. At my pace. My way. Some still asked if I planned to return full-time. I always gave the same answer. No. Because while I still loved the work, the company had changed. And so had I. A few weeks later, I stepped out of a long meeting and saw a group of interns walking through the lobby. One young woman, with thick glasses and a nervous smile, stopped in front of me. "Are you Claire Mendoza?" she asked. I nodded. Her face lit up. "I just wanted to say thank you. What you did, it's almost legend. We talk about it all the time on the internal Slack channels. You made it okay to speak up." I smiled for real. "Then keep speaking up," I told her. "Don't wait for permission." She nodded quickly and hurried off to catch up with her group. I stood there for a moment, watching her disappear down the hall, feeling something that wasn't quite pride. It was something deeper. It was something deeper. It was legacy. That weekend, for the first time in months, I allowed myself to stop. I took a train out of the city, turned off my phone, and watched the scenery drift by like a slow-moving film. At last, my mind let go. No more strategy loops, no contingency plans. Just silence. Just peace. That night, I opened my journal, the same one I had forgotten in the back of a drawer, and wrote a single line that stood above all the rest. I never asked for power. I asked for recognition. And when they didn't give it to me, I built my own table instead of begging for a seat at theirs. In the weeks that followed, the updates rolled in. Sam's leave became permanent. The official statement cited irreconcilable differences in leadership. But the rumors said more. Internal complaints. Quiet terminations before mine. A pattern finally exposed. The culture at VistaCore Technologies began to shift, slowly but visibly. Exit interviews were redesigned. Internal training now included intellectual property education. And for the first time, individual credit became part of engineering milestones. Some executives, eager to rewrite history, began saying at conferences and panels, "Claire was always a core part of the team. We've always valued her expertise." I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to prove. The people who mattered already knew the truth. Just like the code did. The architecture I built still stood, solid, unshaken. And my name, finally, was exactly where it belonged. Etched into the system, the documentation, and more importantly, the history of VistaCore Technologies. Months later, I received something unexpected. A handwritten letter from the chairman himself, James Ortega. "Claire, you changed how we understand leadership. Not by fighting, but by standing your ground. Thank you for showing us what true authority looks like. James." I tucked the letter into the same drawer where, years ago, I had hidden my severance papers. A quiet reminder of where I started. And where I refused to end. Today, I'm the founder of my own firm, Claire Mendoza Consulting. I work with companies that want more than polished speeches or charismatic figureheads. They want to build resilient systems and cultures that genuinely empower their people. I choose my clients carefully. I set my own boundaries. And I never ever sign anything without reading every single line, especially the fine print. Because in the end, this story was never about revenge. It was about worth. About being seen. And about the quiet, unshakable strength of someone who refused to disappear when an entire system tried to erase her. So for anyone who's ever been underestimated, dismissed, or labeled difficult, just for recognizing their own value, here's my advice. You don't need to raise your voice to leave a mark. You only need to know who you are. And never ever give that power to someone who doesn't understand it. Because when someone thinks they've silenced you by firing you, all they've really done is ignite the fire that will change everything.